Okay, can you hear me? Because if you can't hear me, you realise what it's actually like for a person to wear one of those and be working in an office space where you have to talk all the time, either on the phone or in meetings, so forth, the constant repetition of that you need to do while wearing one of those things. Now, why would I wear a carbon filtered mask in an office space? You know, you would think an office space would be, I don't know, fairly pollution free. You're not working in an industrial situation where you know that you need to protect yourself from hazardous material. And in industrial work, you know, everyone should be wearing a mask to protect themselves. However, what's happening in office spaces, you have an accumulation of really, really hazardous petroleum-based material, even though there's no generators running or you know, anything like that. All it is usually it's just people coming in wearing regular perfumes, deodorants, some of them expensive, you know, some of them cheap. That's not the point. That's not the point. The point is here that all these perfumes and deodorants are not regulated by the government. The government in Australia has been extremely lazy on this. They want to claim that they don't have the funds to test all what is in each product. Well, why don't they get the actual manufacturer to pay for them to have their product tested? But they don't do that. And they know that these toxins are coming in and they do nothing. Now, people want to talk about various other forms of pollution and they'll talk about that, but they won't talk about these everyday pollutants that are people that are using are causing cancer, they're causing allergies, they even cause things like diabetes, and it's just really horrible because these substances that are in the deodorants and perfumes, they're not just in those, they're in cleaning products, they're also in food as preservatives, they're also in medicines in really high quantities. So someone like me who doesn't go to medical facilities, it's just no point going to a pharmacist's. Person like me doesn't want to go to a supermarket, so I'm just feeling for the people at the moment being subjected to what's called a welfare card, whereby they have to be given a card and they have to go to places like supermarkets to buy unfood. And be subjected to the toxins in the supermarkets. Now, yes, they can wear one of these, but the thing about these, while they'll filter out most of, well, not even most, but some of the toxic substances that really get in and make you nauseous and horrible from the perfumes and the cleaning products and all that are in supermarkets. It won't eliminate everything. And if a person develops a true allergy is where they get one sniff and they're keeling over and they have to have an EpiPen. Now, if a person gets to that point of a cumulative toxicity of substances like propylene glycol, that's really the danger point. And most people don't start off life being immediately allergic to these things. It gets worse and worse and worse. I'm not saying that, I'm saying most people. So for me, it's just got worse and worse and worse. And whether I was reacting to it younger, that's for a later conversation, but it certainly has never been to the point where I have to wear a mask. And it actually has not been like that in the population. It's just been that these substances have increased in our workplaces, our schools, everything, everything. It's just a total takeover. Now, these are scam industries, hygiene scam industries. If you look up a few of the hygiene, the mental hygiene movements and the hygiene movements and all the scams and things that they tried to get people to do. They didn't just try to get people to do it. They indoctrinated through government advice. So, and particularly during the wars, you got the patriotism, and people are just, yeah, we'll go along with what you say, or else. Because when you got government legislation, like we still have government legislation that is really horrendously violent. They're called mental health acts in Australia. They're in each state and territory. These mean that a person, and it's usually a person who's financially and socially disenfranchised, or they just might be socially disenfranchised, and people really care about them, but they want to fix them because they don't get along with them perfectly, or the person is trying to talk about something. Now, if a person's trying to talk about pollution and nobody is listening, whether that's pollution from electrical magnetic radiation or pollution from things like deodorants or even pollution from, I don't know, something else that has become an industry. They're going to be listened to, but they're not. They're not being listened to. They're instead being mentally ill. Because the big scam industries, particularly in the farms industry, which go along with the medico industry, they don't want their shops to be shut down. They want it just to keep running the same way it has on the increase. And we can't have that happening, because what this means is that a whole lot of people get allergies, and then they get told, oh, you have to have medical tests for that, and then you have to try every single thing that the doctor recommends. And as far as I understand at this point, they're not forcing people to go into medical facilities for that. However, if that person gets mentally ill for speaking out, saying they're suffering from toxins, and they don't know how to articulate it because they haven't worked out that it is actually a chemical or many chemicals that are causing this, or electrical stuff that's causing this. But if they talk about the electrical stuff, they're likely to still get mentally ill, is my understanding on that one. So here we have a person trying to talk about this stuff, and then they get dragged off and have more of these chemicals shoved into their body forcibly. This is a system of government. This is government legislation on a civilian that hasn't committed a crime, so they shouldn't be restricted, and yet are being subjected to arbitrary detention and these torturous forced druggings to silence them? Well, no, not exactly. It's probably not always to silence them. Maybe some of the time it's to silence a person, but most of the time it's just part of the scoop. You know, eugenics-targeting, this eugenics-stigma-targeting. This was drawn up early last century. So you got the 20th century. You're looking earlier in the century with the eugenicists saying, okay, we can target, stigma target this, and this portion of the population. And within that portion of the population included low-paid workers. So any low-paid worker that was going to speak out against exploitation or try to, fight for higher wages was suddenly, oh, your mental hygiene is not good. Let's take you off to the white coats to have you psychiatrized and tortured until you agree what's good for you is good for you. What we think is good for you is good for you. So that's what I meant there. and I was speaking as if I was a psychiatrist, eugenicist. Just to clarify. Yes. So what I want to do here is get a couple of signatures, a couple of government e-petitions signed to their only till 15th of November. We've got E0359, which will stop the perfumes in the office spaces and closed spaces, and have a ban on substances like propylene glycol in personal what do you call them? Products, yeah. Cleaning, no, pouring petrol on yourself, it doesn't clean. So, yeah, anyway, and there's also E0360 E0360, which is to stop for psychiatry. And the fellow who wrote this, Bernard Daniels, his son was subjected to 115 times electrocuted under general anaesthetic in 6 months. And he was also tied to a bed for 69 days. And they skipped state, and then they got Garth again, and they're torturing him up in Queensland. So Australian psychiatry is one of the worst places in the world for forced psychiatry, particularly Victoria. Victoria just it's got a Charter of Human Rights, the Victorian Charter of Human Rights, and you would think, they're sort of like, well, we've got the Victorian Charter of Human Rights, you've all got human rights, you're all equal here. It doesn't work that way, and we've signed and ratified the UNCRPD. Now, as a number of people are saying, how can you sign and ratify something and still be torturing your population, still having half the population die iatrogenic deaths from PBS drug prescriptions that are psychiatric drug prescriptions? I mean, when you see that sort of stuff in stats, you've got to say that's just not on, So do sign these two petitions, E0360 and E0359, because we want to stop the pollution on our bodies and in the force of that, and the scamming of that whole industry that's there, because this is not okay. You've got to say it's not okay.